Hi, and today we're going to be looking at a question that I get all the time from designers and non-designers alike, and that is what is the difference between all these different file types? AI file, EPS, SVG, PNG, JPEG, TIFF, PDF. When do I use one versus the other? Why did my designer give me all these different files? So, great question. We're going to dive in that today with a high-level overview of the different types of file formats. So as you can see here, the way I'm going to walk through this is with comparing vector versus non-vector file formats. With the main ones here. There's obviously a couple more different file formats than what I've included, but like I said, this is a high-level overview, and so we're going to dive into each one of these briefly. All right, so with my vector, the three file types that I've got to talk to you all about is first AI. So that stands for Adobe Illustrator. This is actually a designer's file. This is the Adobe software file that your designer's using. For this demonstration, I'm going to be looking at a logo. So here's a logo I designed. And so this was designed in Illustrator. That's probably what most designers are going to be using. And so whenever you're looking at the different files that you might have gotten from your designer, this is really more of a designer's file than perhaps something that you might use to upload to the website or use to print with, but you still might get it anyway. But I'm going to highlight that in red that that's really primarily what this file is for. All right, the next one is an EPS file. Again, this falls in that category of vector files, and this is great for printers. So your designer's probably going to create, say, like a logo or whatever format, and then they can save it as an EPS. And then that's what your printer's going to ask for because it's a vector, and that's going to scale really, really well. And so that's a key file for you. Also note that whenever it's an EPS, I have found sometimes when I've asked companies to give me an EPS of their logo, I think maybe they didn't quite understand what all an EPS does. You can't just save, say like a JPEG, which we'll touch on later, and then save it as an EPS file. Like it truly needs to be a vector file and not something else kind of stuck in that with the label on the end. EPS is great. All right, and the third vector file we're going to talk about is an SVG. This is very similar to EPS. It's also that vector. Oh, and I'm going to highlight this as ideal for printers before I forget. Yeah, so this is the same idea, but this one is with web-based. So your printer is most likely not going to ask you for an SVG, but your web developer probably will. So you're looking at scalable vector files, and the key ones for print are EPS, and the key one for web is SVG. Let's move on to non-vector files. All right, we're going to look at these three, starting with a PNG. So this is ideal for web, and it's a compressed file type. So because these are non-vector, they're going to, one, be smaller, but they're also not going to be great for scalable, but their size is significantly less. So whenever you're using it online or wherever you're storing this file, way less storage. It's a compressed image file, but this is one that your web developer will probably be asking for, either an SVG or a PNG. All right, next one is JPEG. I'm sure this is one you all have heard of, very common file type. You might see a file with JPEG with or without the E. That's just kind of something way back whenever they were needing to have a certain or limited certain character count within file extensions, but that's exactly the same thing. There's no difference between it with or without the E on there. But this is also a compressed image file. So non-vector, compressed, similarities between PNG and JPEG. And this is for high quality image sharing and printing. So as this one is ideal for web graphics, this is ideal for images, printing, things like that. So you're probably going to see this a lot, this type of file, from a photographer. Once you get back images from your photo shoot, if you're going to print things, you're probably going to want to do those as a JPEG. One of the questions that are often raised for designers is, okay, say I've got the image back from my photographer and I want to upload it to the web. Should that be a PNG file or a JPEG file? Generally, PNG tends to be smaller. There's not a huge, massive difference in size usually, so I see sometimes both of those happening. However, a PNG will convert to web colors, and you can obviously change some of the things with the JPEG, but all that to say, I tend to go to putting PNGs on the web and JPEGs more for print, but that kind of depends on who you talk to a little bit. That's pretty close, so you just kind of take that per project. But just remember, PNG, generally great for web graphics, JPEG, generally great for images sharing and printing. All right, and so our third one with the non-vector is a TIFF file. This is also probably one that you see from your photographers. And this is ideal for image storing and also as well as printing. And this is a much larger file, but it's going to be great also if you were to print the image at a really large scale. It'd be great for that. Or if you're just storing the file like more of the larger image and you don't want to have to downsize that to be a JPEG or a PNG, TIFF is a great storage file for that. But it is not a vector, but it is a nice large file. And then the fourth one I've got under the non-vector, you'll see I kind of just visually did a gradient here from orange to purple because PDF is actually a little bit of both worlds. It can be a vector, it cannot be a vector. I'm personally going to stick it in the non-vector category just for the sake of as designers. Usually you're doing your vector for probably more like logo type of things. This is, again, a general statement. PDF, and a PDF's purpose is it's a document file sharing format. And so I'm looking at that thinking that as a logo, probably you're not going to be saving your logo so much as PDFs. It's going to be more like flyers or booklets, things like that. It does have a high quality, it's a good file type, but it really focuses more on document sharing as opposed to maybe images and web graphics. That's a little bit of a wild card on that, but I usually advise people that if we're going to be doing a logo or an individual image, to use a different file format and not the PDF. All right, so the next thing I want to look at is I've mentioned about like with image sizes. So let's look at when I say there's a difference in image size, what are we talking about? First of all, remember that 1,000 kilobytes or KB is 1 megabyte MB. So 1,000 to 1. All right, so this particular AI file, this is not to say all AI files are this size, but this particular AI file is 1.2 megabytes. So pretty big. Let's move on to the next vector, see what that is. Okay, so the same file, EPS, is actually a little bit bigger than AI, just so you know. And then SVG, remember this is for the web, significantly less. So that's why your web designer is going to want to have an SVG for one reason, because it's so much smaller, going to have page load time. This is great. So just so you can see how much smaller the SVG file is. All right, moving down to non-vector, a PNG. We've got 10 kilobytes here, teeny tiny, versus the JPEG. Not that this is a megabyte file, but still significantly bigger. You'll also notice on this file, the JPEG is not able to have the transparent background. So that's something to take into consideration. If you're printing and you need a transparent background, JPEG would not be the way to go. And then also, if you're uploading online, that would be another reason why you might want to favor a PNG over a JPEG. But not a crazy huge file, but definitely much, much bigger than PNG. And then let's look down here at the TIFF. Remember I mentioned that the TIFF is ideal for image storing and printing. So if you had your JPEG and you had that original image as a TIFF, storing it much, much bigger at 7.8 megabytes, way, way bigger. So you're not going to want to be uploading this to a website by any means. You might want to be using it for printing. You could do that. It's not, I mean, it's pretty big, but you could probably still print pretty good. But mostly this is like your master image saved as a TIFF. And the last one, let's look at PDF. PDF, here we go. This particular logo saved as a PDF is smaller than a JPEG, smaller than the TIFF, but still bigger than PNG. So it goes ahead and shows you that of the non-vector, you've got the smallest file size as a PNG, again, which is why I tend to favor uploading PNGs to web more than JPEG, even though that's sometimes a question. All right, and the last thing I want to show you is looking at that vector versus non-vector. Here on this screen, everything looks exactly the same, except that you can see that the JPEG and the TIFF can't have transparent backgrounds. Otherwise, you might be thinking, okay, they all look pretty great. Visually, there's nothing's fuzzy or anything like that. So let's look at a large example. Here I have a vector versus a non-vector, the EPS versus the JPEG, used significantly bigger. And you can see here how the vector is much, much, much more clear than the JPEG. So if you're using these types of files, very tiny, maybe on a business card, you're probably almost never going to be able to tell a difference. It's really going to show up when you start using it bigger. It might not be, it might be something like a banner that you're printing off where it's large and people are also getting up pretty close, when you're really going to be tell a difference in image quality. So that's how come that vector blows up, works really, really well, versus the JPEG does not expand well. It's really good for the smaller ones, and you always want to be using EPS for larger things and it's very scalable, so it's a fantastic file size. All right, I'm going to go ahead and link this document down below in the show notes on this YouTube video. So if you'd like to download this and use it as a reference, you're welcome to do that. And that's all for today's tutorial on types of file formats. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to be noted when I have new videos up. Bye.